Hello family, this is African Esquire TV. I'm your host Tierney Cherie. If you have not already, please subscribe to AfricanEsquireTV.com. That is my website where I will post my videos before I post them to YouTube, and also where I want to share other content with the community. So what I'm going to do today is a video that's going to be different than my normal typical video, but I honestly think this could be one of the more important videos that I've done. And I want to talk about the issue of low quality food that is pushed in the Black community. Now, this is in light of everything going on in the fast food realm. If you don't know, and I'm sure you had to, especially if you're a subscriber from the US, but Popeyes, which is a a restaurant that has always marketed itself to the Black community. It had released a chicken sandwich. Long story short, the chicken sandwich was basically promoted by Black people on Twitter and on social media, and they were able to sell out this sandwich like within a week or two or something like that, just from Black people going out talking about, oh, this sandwich is so good. You see these news clips of Black people standing in long lines just to get this chicken sandwich, drive-throughs or crowded just to get this chicken sandwich. Then you hear these horrible stories of people getting in fights over the chicken. Black people or people getting in fights over these chicken sandwiches. And then obviously there was the guy in Houston who actually pulled a gun out at the Popeyes restaurant whenever it became whenever the sandwich sold out, and he pulled a gun out basically because he was so upset that they ran out of chicken. And of course, this reinforces a stereotype of Black people, a stereotype that was created by white supremacy, because really everyone loves chicken, but they created a stereotype that Black people especially love chicken. And this is basically reminiscing of a lot of old racial epithets that we thought we left behind, but unfortunately we are reinforcing ourselves because we've been so taught to act a certain way and to show ourselves a certain way that we are only reinforcing what has been taught to us and shown to us of what we are. Now, I want to talk about this in two phases. One, I'm going to talk about the issue of fast food inside of the Black community. Towards the end of the video, I want to talk about my personal health regimen, and I'm not like a fitness expert or anything, but just from what I've learned being a Black woman in America, what I've learned about the food that is available to me versus what is not available to me, there's just some things that I won't eat. So I want to share what I don't eat. I'm sure some of you probably are even more advanced than this. A lot of you probably, for example, if you follow Dr. Sebi, I know that you're even more, hardcore vegan, and, you won't touch certain foods, and you are more probably, definitely more knowledgeable than me on this subject. Me, I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of studying, I listen to a lot of people, and I just make my own decisions about, okay, this is not something that's going to be healthy to me, and based off of different people who have said different things, I might tweak my diet and change my diet. And I can honestly say from what the changes that I've made, that I feel a lot better just as a whole person. Obviously, you have the fitness aspect, but there's also the mental aspect of knowing that you're not putting poison in your body that has been pushed into your communities, has been promoted, and it has been promoted and broadcasted to your communities. Knowing that you're not ingesting these things and that you're being cautious about what you take in, that honestly is a liberating feeling that I feel. So I want to share that towards the end of the video. But before we get there, we're going to talk about this whole fast food fiasco in a historical context. So I'm going to read two articles. The first one is from the Washington Post, and the title of this article is How the Fast Food Industry Courted African American Consumers. It was written by a man named Alex Park. It will be in the description box. Stepping into Kentucky Fried Chicken in 1993 in predominantly Black neighborhoods in cities such as Atlanta, Louisville, and Newark, customers were surprised to see a few changes to their local fried chicken franchise. R&B and hip-hop had replaced the standard music blaring from the speakers, and on the menu, collard greens and red beans and rice sat alongside mashed potatoes and gravy. Strangest of all, though, there were the employees behind the counter dressed in a uniform, but it was with some more Afrocentric accents. Vests and ties made from kente cloth, dashikis, and kufi hats. About 300 restaurants across the country got this makeover in the early 1990s, part of the fast food brand's Neighborhood KFC campaign. Gary Gerderman, a spokesperson for KFC, told Scripps Howard News, blah, 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 "This is a marketing concept that was designed to put us closer to the communities we serve," he said. "We started looking at our customer base and found an opportunity to align ourselves with the African American community." So, if you ever wondered when you see these fast food commercials and you see this marketing, whether they're purposely trying to market themselves to the black community, because you would think, we're only, 13% of the population, so why are they so consumed with marketing themselves to the black community? So you would think that they're actually trying to market themselves to everyone, and, this is what, will sell to everyone. No, they're particularly and specifically trying to market themselves to black people. It's not a coincidence whenever we see in all these commercials, we see rappers and singers, and we hear hip hop music, and we hear people, the actors rapping and everything. They're specifically trying to market themselves to our community. So that's something that, if you were ever wondering, yes, it's true. You are being targeted inside of this marketing scheme. So decades later, the fast food industry has been seen a severe decline in popularity in the United States, but black customers remain as important to the industry's bottom line as ever before. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, from 2013 to 2014, African Americans over the age of 2 derive 20% of their food energy from fast food. That's compared to 15% for whites and 16% for Hispanics. Many experts associate the enduring appeal of fast food to African Americans, especially those living in inner cities, with food deserts. So if you don't know what a food desert is the thing that you see in a lot of African American or just urban communities, when you see that there's nowhere to buy fresh food. All you see is McDonald's, and you may see a corner store that has a bunch of processed food, and that's really the only thing that you can get in walking distance. You would literally have to take a car across town or take a bus across town just to get some fresh food. That's what we call food deserts. So I'll skip forward a little bit. The fast food industry's courtship of African Americans began in earnest in the 1960s at a time racked with racial tension. As Chinjo details in Supervising Urban America, how inner cities got fast food with government help. When urban riots broke out across America after 1968's assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., Lyndon B. Johnson directed the Small Business Administration to lend money to businesses willing to create jobs in inner cities. They had proven business models and the backing of national advertising campaigns. Fast food brands had a national appeal. And since franchise stores were independently owned, fast food companies could benefit from the small business loans without taking on the risk of investing their own money in impoverished areas. Franchising created other advantages for the fast food industry in targeting African American consumers. Franchise owners were intimately familiar with the neighborhoods they operated in, and they understood their customers in a way fast food executives did not. In the 1970s, at the assistance of some black franchise owners, McDonald's hired Borough Communications, a celebrated black-owned advertising agency in Chicago, to launch a campaign aimed at African American consumers. McDonald's was successful in the inner city, and the ones that could mimic it were the ones that they survived. So I want to point out something about, this whole thing. So basically what they're saying is that 1968, if you don't know, that was like the most pivotal year as far as everyone who thought they could just push the black community aside and not have to worry about it actually becoming scared. They were scared because black people all over the United States after the assassination of Martin Luther King started rioting. And so they were looking for any type of way to pacify the Negro, to get the Negro to be back in its place and not anything to worry about. And so what they started doing is something that you'll see happen a lot after a riot happens, like let's say the Baltimore riot or let's say the Los Angeles riot. You see that they're trying to scramble and, push some programs into the community, just do some things that are going to calm down the black people so that, white supremacy can go back to operating as it always did. Now, what Johnson did is he offered a business loan to people who are willing to go into black communities and invest. So fast food restaurants did not go and they did not actually send like white executives to go into the black communities. Instead, they found some black people who were willing to own franchises. And because they were willing to own franchises, they weren't the ones taking on the risk. It was the black people. Now, notice what happens here. This is what capitalism does all the time. It doesn't want to take on the risk itself. So they find some black person that's just itching for an opportunity. Yes, pick me. Some black person who is willing to do things that might not be good for their community. They find that person and they say, okay, we'll sponsor you to go into that community and actually be the person who brings the money to us. And this is what happened. This is why we have so much fast food inside of black communities, because black franchise owners, and this is the dark side of capitalism, because we always, hear people talk about black business. And trust me, I'm a big supporter of black businesses, but I'm not a supporter of black businesses that come at the expense of my community. However, we're pushing this narrative of black business, like, that's the only thing that matters as long as it's owned by a black person. No, a lot of other things matter. Like, is that black person that owns that business going to reinvest that money into the community? Is that black person that owns that business going to be accountable to the black community? Does that black person that owns that business, does he care about the community, and is he doing something that might hurt the community? And we know that McDonald's has not been good for the community. It's only hurted the community. So, we have, people who are going in, and everyone's so happy about black entrepreneurship and black businesses that we're not worried about the fact that, to me, you put a McDonald's, in your neighborhood, it's no different than putting a liquor store in your corner. It's no different, because you're still putting poison in the community, and that's a poison that is easily accessible to everyone. At least liquor stores, you're supposed to be 21, whereas McDonald's, you got little babies walking around eating Happy Meals. So this is something that hurts all of us, every single generation of us. And to me, this is something that was negative for the community, and that black people were used in order to put a guise over it to make it seem that they're doing something to invest in the communities, but really they were doing something that was going to only exploit us, take money from us, and ultimately diminish our health. Now, let me go back one second. Okay, so as their wealth accumulated, black franchise owners often became icons in their communities, supporting charitable causes like scholarship funds and the Martin Luther King Day celebrations, and further enhancing the image of fast food among black people. By the late 1980s, the idea of black pride or black nationalism was flourishing. In 1988, Jesse Jackson began popularizing the term African American for the first time. So if y'all ever wondered, why do we say African American? And I'm not a fan of the term African American, but I do think that we have to find some type of term to talk about people who actually were descended from the slave trade, just so that we understand what we're talking about in particular conversation. So some people say ADOS. I honestly don't like the term African American, because to me, you don't hear any other race using that type of, I'm Chinese American. No, if you're Chinese, you're Chinese. Or if I'm Korean American, if you're Korean, you're Korean. You have every single person, every single other race, they're fine with just being their ethnicity. So I consider myself African. But, that was just a side note if y'all are wondering where it came from. It came from Jesse Jackson in the 80s. So nationalists, even militant black figures, were becoming cultural icons, with Spike Lee's Malcolm X earning critical praise in 1992, and hip-hop groups like Public Enemy and NWA seeing massive commercial success. There was this sense that there was an underlying interest in nationalistic messages, says Robert Weems. He is a professor of business history at Wichita State University. We saw corporate marketers finding a way to tap into this sense of black militancy and pride to sell products. So let's pause right there. Yes, the things that we think are so radical, images of Malcolm X, Huey P. Newton, the Black Panthers, Black Power Fist, these things that we think are so radical and that are threats to white supremacy, they too will use that to market something to you. They too will try to find some type of way to turn something that, Malcolm X, he was completely a counter message to something like this, but they will try to take something that is really a threat to white supremacy and turn it into an asset. That is what is done oftentimes. And, you know, a lot of times we're so thirsty, I would say, to see representation of Black radical thought, of Black nationalism, that we see like a, you know, a Public Enemy, you know, poster, or we see like a Black Power fest. We see these things and we just are so hungry for them because they're so rare inside of the mainstream that we just think that it's automatically something that's going to be for the community. But a lot of times, like for example, if you see certain like rallies that might be happening, they might be using Black nationalist you know, like symbolisms and whatnot, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're Black nationalists. So the message is also always more important than the images or than the symbols. The message should always be the big thing that we try to look for than over what the symbols are. So carrying on, so it was around this time that KFC launched its campaign. I'm gonna skip over a little bit. So Weems, this is the guy who was the professor, he said something that I thought was really interesting. He says he's not surprised by the apparent success of the KFC campaign and when they were wearing kente cloth inside of KFC, because from the standpoint of African Americans, anytime you have entities that tell Black people you matter, it's going to have a receptive audience. So let's let that soak in. Anytime that, even if you're someone who doesn't, you know, particularly care for the Black community, even if you're someone that's doing things that hurt the community, anytime you have these entities, these businesses saying, Black people, you matter. Black people, we see you. Then, according to him, we're going to be receptive. And I absolutely agree with that. And you know, I'm not sure, I didn't look this man up. I'm assuming he's a white man who is analyzing this. It's completely true. Because think about how you have people who are, you know, so anxious to see certain Black people who are going to star instead of lead roles, even if the movie is something that actually is something that we shouldn't want to be associated with. Think about how thirsty people were to see Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill. Like, what is that going to do? But all it is saying is, hey, Black people, you know, sure, U.S. currency is probably being used to exploit all of Africa, but just so that you know, we're going to put her on this dollar bill and say that you matter, guys. You matter. Now carry on. These are the things that we're thirsty for. These are the things that we want so bad. And so it's very important that we understand that we're being studied. We're being studied every single day. Our behaviors, when we're on social media, when you think you're just, you know, complaining about, you know, something and that no one sees it. No, you're being studied constantly. And they understand that Black people, we care so much about symbolism, and we care about being told that we matter from the system, that even the system that oppresses us. So they use this for their advantage, and they'll say you matter without actually meaning it, and they'll say you matter while doing things that actually show that you don't matter, while doing things that actually go against your interests. So it's like the metaphor that Malcolm used to use when he said that, you know, you have a fox versus a wolf, and yeah, you know, the wolf, he might let you know up front that he hates you. But the fox, you know, he has a smile on his face. He might play with you. He plays with the little rabbit before he eats them. And then he eats them. You know, same thing. It's the same thing inside of the capitalist system. You have these corporations, and they'll use, you know, pro-Black language. You know, they'll say, hey, we're going to donate some money to this charity, you know, this Black charity. Yeah, totally. But really, they're only doing that in order to achieve their overall purpose. And the purpose always is that they will ultimately be able to exploit the community in order to achieve a certain level of success that they want to achieve. So we're always going to be collateral damage in them reaching their goal, which is why capitalism is so dangerous, because it encourages people to, instead of help the communities that are in need, it encourages people to be self-serving in order to reach some type of level of success that really, you know, is kind of stupid when you think about it. Like, if you're already a billionaire, why do you have to be a trillionaire? I'm gonna go forward a little bit. Okay, so The Afrocentric motif has waned since the 1990s because, unfortunately, Black people aren't really Afrocentric anymore. But the fast food companies have made other efforts to court African Americans. In the 2000s, KFC launched a campaign called Pride 360, which sponsored events at historically Black colleges and universities. In 2007, the chain launched a singing contest under the Pride 360 banner, awarding an amateur singer who successfully incorporated words including heritage and family, and the KFC name into a piece of music with an appearance on BET. There's my question: when they do stuff like this, why are we not boycotting KFC? Like when Burger King had Mary J. Blige stand up on a table singing about crispy chicken. Why do we still go to these restaurants? Because to me, this should be offensive. The fact that they're like, okay, whoever can incorporate heritage, family, and KFC into a song, we will let you be the winner. That should be something that's kind of offensive, that they think that you're so simplistic. And maybe they're right that we are so simplistic, because guess what? We still keep buying, and we still keep allowing these people to come into our communities and sell food to us. So, wrong part. Okay. Not to be left out of a fast food marketing trend, McDonald's has created its own campaign with an annual awards show honoring Black celebrities for their contributions to the community and a gospel tour, now in its 12th year, under the banner 365 Black. Beyond their promotional value, these campaigns have helped to build a relationship between fast food brands and a group of marginalized Americans in ways that few other industries have, Chatelain says. The marginalization and discrimination makes African Americans receptive to companies actually putting in the effort to ask for their businesses. And this is an interesting point that was made. The moment when the fast food industry was beginning to think of the African American market, we were only a few years away from the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, she says. If we go from a moment in which public accommodation in the restaurant was a site of trauma and racial violence to one in which the industry is trying to convince customers that it is a normal place to go and that there are not any prohibitions against you there, you can understand why it becomes very appealing and very attractive for Black people to go to a fast food restaurant. And I think this is an interesting point. We have to start asking, I say yes, are we as a community suffering from PTSD? Because that to me is what all of this, we want to be accepted by white supremacy. We want to be accepted. We want to be loved. We want you to tell us that we matter. To me, all of that is just PTSD. We were so wrongly treated. We were not allowed to go to any public accommodations at one time in this country. And if we could be lynched and all these things, or be beat up, get food thrown on us and all these things, right? But here we are today. We're so damaged from that, and we still remember in our subconscious that when you have these corporations trying to market and trying to get you to buy food from them, they are able to do that even though they're selling horrible food to you. And we're so thirsty for that attention that we'll just go with it without questioning. Like Popeyes, we'll go back to Popeyes. They have been so blatant in marketing to Black people. If you think about like the commercials when you see these Black women who look like Mammy, who are advertising Popeyes chicken, and then McDonald's too. If you like listen to the commercials, like it's always some ghetto Black thing going on, or some Mammy caricature. Like they have been trying so hard to market themselves to us, and the fact that we really want that acceptance because we've been so traumatized from segregation. And that's true, we have been traumatized, but we have to start undoing that trauma and stop, just trying to react based on it. Because if we start undoing the trauma, it won't be so easy for people to figure us out. It won't be so easy for people to just march up in our neighborhood and say, okay, we figured them out. All we have to do is say this, that, and the third, and they'll buy our food. We should be able to undo the effects that segregation has done on us so that we can actually be able to look for food that's actually going to be for us, and not just for us as far as words from the corporation, but actually for our bodies and for our growth. So there's another article. I'm going to skim this other one because honestly, a lot of these points were hit by the article I just read. This one is on the New Republic, and again, the article will be in the description. I'm gonna just jump around. So when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, there was a brief moment of shock, compassion before racial anxieties flooded the internet. Victims of the disaster were quickly recast as looters, criminals, and layabouts. They were government dependents, seeking even more entitlements now that they were bona fide survivors. Some of these hideous opinions drew on the physical evidence of the bad character of hurricane survivors, their size. The mostly black bodies crowding the Superdome, getting on rafts, and being carried away by helicopters were too large for online critics. Obesity, while common in the U.S., I'm sorry, I didn't tell y'all the title of this article. The title is How Fast Food Chains Supersized Inequality, is written by Max Holleran. I'm sorry. Let me continue. Obesity, while common in the U.S. and overrepresented in the South, was conflated with blackness. Black bodies fleeing New Orleans were not only linked to historic stereotypes of menace and criminality, but also slothfulness, helplessness, and tropical turbidity, unwelcome and hardworking America. African Americans are more likely to be obese in the United States than their white counterparts. The same is true for Hispanics. For some conservatives, that may be an indictment. For the rest of us, it is a public health problem. The rise in obesity in the U.S. is an epidemic, and much of the root causes lie in poverty, a condition more prevalent in communities of color. In many black U.S. cities, bodegas serve dinner in the form of chips and soda to low-income people living nearby who have no access to neighborhood supermarkets. For those without much money or options, fast food can be a blessing, a full meal that is quick and affordable in a safe and predictable setting. Yet these very meals are one of the country's biggest health menaces. Filled with fat and sugar, fast food is contributing greatly to obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And I think, let's see. Okay, I'm going to jump down a little bit. So, like ethnic advertising and alcohol and cigarettes, fast food companies sold a dream of middle-class affluence to communities of colors that were nonetheless still excluded from the housing and education that would make those aspirations a reality. This is talking about back in the 60s. Obesity and diet in America have little to do with personal responsibility and everything to do with public policy, of course. So this is a good article too. I'm not going to go through all of it because a lot of the points were hit, and I feel like I made the points that I found were significant from the other article. But you should read the entire article on your own. So now I'm just going to give you guys some tips as far as things that perhaps you might want to not eat, and things that I suggest that we do as a community to move forward. So one thing we have to start doing is reading labels. Read labels, because you're going to find out there's a lot of things in food that you did not know were in food. And one of them we're going to talk about is genetically modified foods. So GMO foods are foods that literally, it's what it said. They are genetically modified, meaning inside of some type of lab, they created like a different formula of a way to create this food, and the companies grabbed onto these foods because they're like, oh, we can market this quicker, we can make it more quicker, so let's use your modified food instead of using regular food. So the two big things that you want to look for, there's other genetically modified foods, but the two big ones that you want to look for whenever you're looking at your ingredients at the supermarket are corn and soy. So I didn't realize this, and I just got on the whole anti-GMO thing this year. Corn and soy is in almost everything. Everything. Like, if it's not one, it's the other, and it's probably both. The animals that we eat are eating corn and soy. So if you eat cows, you should try to eat grass-fed beef. But if you're not eating grass-fed beef and your cow is being fed corn, that's now a genetically modified cow. Same thing with chickens. Chickens are fed genetically modified corn. When you look at, it's not just corn itself, corn starch. There's like soy lecithin. That's something that you'll see inside of a lot of products. Anything with corn, just read your ingredients. You're going to find that so many things have corn. And so when we go back to talking about fast food, fried chicken in itself, like, I'll eat fried chicken on occasion. Like, to me, if you eat something on occasion, that's fine. But the problem is the chicken that you're eating, number one, it has probably more than likely has hormones. In addition, it's being fed corn, and also the coating around the chicken more than likely has corn in it or soy. So these are the things that even if you're trying to go to like I heard that KFC had a come out with a new meatless chicken tenders or something like that. Well, you should be asking what's inside of the meatless chicken tenders, because if it's soy or corn, then that meatless chicken tender is genetically modified. Now, what's the problem with genetically modified organisms? So I'm gonna just read some things, and again, this is just supposed to be an entry point. Hopefully we're all doing our own research, but as you all know on my channel, I just had a son who's with me right now, and one of the big things for me was educating myself on what causes autism. And one of the things that I found is that a lot of people are linking autism to GMO. So corn has this it's a chemical that's sprayed oftentimes on both corn and soy, but more so corn. And I'm going to read from an article. This is from drpromuter.com. It's called glyphosate, and has been made, it's weighed into our food supply as about 90% of all corn and soy, as well as a significant amount of wheat, are treated with this toxic chemical. In a new study published, it was February of that year. I don't have the year in front of me, sorry. Dr. Shaw describes a couple of triplets, 2 male children with autism and 1 female child with a possible seizure disorder. All 3 children were found to have dramatic elevation of their urinary glyphosate levels, and additional laboratory studies showed that the mitochondria, the energy producing parts of their cells, were not working properly. The author goes on to talk about sources of glyphosate, indicating that glyphosate is found in many GMO foods. It turns out that this family was eating a lot of corn tortillas. As we all know, almost all corn available here in America is glyphosate laced. So it's been this glyphosate in particular, and there's a lot of other articles. This is just something I pulled off the internet really quick about glyphosate, but it's really strongly linked to autism. And so if you're a mother and you're eating a lot of things that are GMO, if you're eating a lot of corn or a lot of soy, and let's say you're breastfeeding, or let's say you're carrying a child, you're also supplying your child with this chemical. So that's one thing about corn. I'm going to scroll up and we're going to talk about some other things about corn. This is an article from Global Research, California. So a study was published showing the negative effects of GMOs on the intestinal tract. Study shows that rats that were found GM corn for only 90 days did indeed suffer rather serious damage to the surface mucous membranes of the jejunum, which is a part of the small intestines. There were also signs of inflammation around the area of damage in the form of white blood cell infiltration. The mucosal glands were disturbed and blood vessels were congested. There were an increased level of shedding of mucosal cells, higher rates of division of cell lining the mucosal glands, and larger number of mucus-secreting globule cells. The damage of the GM-fed rats was so obvious that the researchers concluded that consumption of GM corn profoundly alters the jejunal histological microscopic structure. So this is a study on corn, and also just, it mentions inside of this article that there was also a new study that showed that rats that were given a lot of GMO corn were also found to be infertile. This next article I'm going to read just pulls a lot of different sources about the issue of GM soy, not corn. So, according to Russian researcher at the Institute of Ecology and Evolution of the Russian Academy of Sciences and the National Association for Gene Security, hamsters that were fed very high GM soy diets for 2 years over 3 generations produced horrifying results. By the 3rd generation, most of the hamsters lost the ability to have babies. showed slower growth and suffered a high mortality rate among the pups. Furthermore, in the third generation even had hair growing inside of their mouths. This is from genetically modified soy. In 2005, Irina Imakova of the Russian National Academy of Sciences reported that more than half of babies from mother rats fed genetically modified soy died within the first 3 weeks. Even more shocking was when Imakova fed male rats genetically modified soy. Their testicles changed from the normal pink to dark blue. According to researchers at York University in England, soon after genetically modified soy was introduced into the countries, soy allergies skyrocketed 50%. The Weston A. Price Foundation has filed a lawsuit against the state of Illinois on behalf of prisoners who suffered serious health complications by being fed excessive amounts of soy products. In 2004, the state of Illinois began using large amounts of soy in prison menus in order to save money and use less meat. The lawsuit claims that the soy being fed to the plaintiffs and the amounts being fed to them constituted cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution, as well as a denial of the plaintiff's liberty and violation of their due process rights under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Keep in mind, soy is very heavily inside of a lot of fast food, but particularly McDonald's, their burgers are predominantly soy. So let's digest just the genetically modified part. These are things that we are eating a lot. If you look at Black communities, not just the fast food joints, but also the stores that are available, a lot of what they sell is processed, and almost all of it has high amounts of soy or corn. So not only do we have the whole issue of organic, I'm not even necessarily talking about organic in this video, although, I try to eat organic also. But the issue that even, forget the organic part of it, the foods that aren't organic, they are modifying the ingredients inside of these foods, and they're having negative health consequences on us. Think about what this means whenever you hear about all the horrible health statistics for Black people, Black mothers who have high infant mortality rates, Black women with high thyroids. I mean, this is something that I wasn't even aware of so much, the issue of thyroids inside of the Black community. But these are the symptoms whenever you're eating so much of these processed foods. This is what the result could be. So again, if anything, just do your own research on the GMO thing. You're going to find, of course, a lot of sources that are like, there's nothing wrong with GMO because it's been basically approved by, the FDA and all that stuff. And they're saying, oh, it's fine, it's fine. And the reason is obviously capitalism. They're making money off of this. And some people argue that it's because of GMO that we're able to feed people. If we didn't have GMO, then we wouldn't be able to feed people around the world. Well, that's not the reason why, because honestly, there's enough food for everyone. There's enough food that's not processed. That we don't have to process food in order to have enough food for everyone. The problem is when you have excess food inside of places like the US or like Europe, and you have other places that are not being given enough food. That's the problem, not the fact that there's not enough food. This is a lie that's always propagated because they want to try to justify these things that are doing to our foods. But again, mainstream will say, oh, genetically modified is fine, but do your own research and look up the studies. There's a lot of other studies. I just gave you guys a brief glimpse of some of the issues, and so you'll find a lot more if you keep doing your own research. So let's talk about some other things that I do in my diet personally. So one thing for me is that I really eat very, very little dairy. And I would say no dairy, but I go out to eat or I'll go to a friend's house and eat. And, let's say there's they make a cake and put some milk in it. That's the only times I'll eat dairy, is if it's I'm eating someone else's food. But I mostly eat at home, and from the food that I cook, I don't use any dairy products. I don't use milk. If I'm making mashed potatoes, I'm not going to use milk. I don't use cheese. I eat non-dairy ice cream, so I really don't eat a lot of dairy, and I think this has actually been a tremendous benefit to my health. Now, one of the things that inspired me to leave dairy, aside from just different documentaries that you watch. But one thing that really convinced me that this is something that Black people in particular should take serious is a study that I remember reading when I was in college. So I'm going to brief the study. This will be available. I know I said they'll be in the description. All of these articles will be on AfricanEsquireTV.com because this is kind of like a lot for me to put in the description box. So I'm going to make a blog post and link the blog post in the description box so that you guys can find all of these articles whenever you want to do your research. So this is from Think Progress. What happened when scientists put African Americans on an African diet and Africans on an American diet? In recent years, public health experts have acknowledged that lowering the risk of cancer among people of color in the United States, particularly African Americans, will require diet and environmental changes that can only come about through a combination of government intervention and individual fortitude. However, questions remain about what the ideal food selection, let's go to the study. In a study conducted by the University of Pittsburgh, 20 African Americans and 20 South Africans switched diets for 2 weeks. In this time, Africans consumed traditional American food, meaning meat and cheese, high in fat, while African Americans took on traditional African diets, high in fiber and low in fat, plenty of vegetables, beans, and cornmeal with little meat. After the exchange, researchers performed colonoscopies on both groups and found that those in the African diet group increased the production of butyrate, a fatty acid proven to protect against colon cancer. Members of the American diet, on the other hand, developed changes in their gut that scientists say precede the development of cancerous cells. So, although more than 90% of Americans don't know there's a link between diet and cancer risk, the American Society for Clinical Oncology recently announced that obesity will soon surpass tobacco as the leading cause of cancer. Since and that's something you never hear, right? The stereotype about cancer is that it's some person that's skinny and frail, but obesity links to cancer. Since the 1970s, rates of obesity have more than tripled, causing 1 in 5 cancer deaths and $50 billion in healthcare spending, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Risk factors are exacerbated for people of color. African Americans are 1.8 times more likely to develop type 2 diabetes, 1.4 times more likely to be obese than their white and Latino counterparts. This especially holds true for those who have sedentary lifestyles, most likely brought on in unsafe neighborhood conditions, inadequate access to parks and recreational centers, and long distances to important locations as outlined in recent reports. So I'll stop right there. The whole article is going to be, again, on AfricanEsquireTV.com. So dairy, that's one thing that, as I said, I cut out. I want to also go to, actually, let me go to the next food I don't eat. The next food I don't eat processed meat. Processed meat, if you don't know, and there's so many articles on this. I mean, this is not something that's even like hidden. It's very, very closely linked to cancer and other different health issues. So that means I don't eat sausages. For a while I was doing like the like the veggie ones. If I'm really itching for a sausage, you can do like a veggie sausage, and it's more likely made from some type of soy product. So you want to look for non-GMO, of course. But I don't even really do that anymore. If I make eggs, I just eat eggs with bread or something. Like I don't necessarily need meat with my eggs anymore. Sometimes I will eat uncured bacon. So bacon is a processed meat. Uncured bacon is not processed as other bacon is. I think it uses some type of celery salt in order to give it the salty flavor. However, it's not processed in the sense that other bacon is actually processed. I don't eat lunch meat. So that means when I'm going out, if I go and get a sandwich, I'm not going to get anything with lunch meat on it. Lunch meat, again, is a processed meat. Again, very highly linked to cancer. So I'm going to end this video out by going to a good resource, and it will be posted on AfricanEsquireTV.com. And that is the African Health Pyramid. It is a PDF that I found a while back when I was trying to change my diet. But these are just some tips that you can take. So go for greens. Greens like spinach, collards, mustard, turnips, turnip greens. Um, they keep your blood, liver, and kidney in top health. And enjoy a variety of vegetables, fruits, mostly whole grains, and cereals, beans, herbs, spices, peanuts, nuts, sweet potatoes, tuna, mackerel, salmon are very heart healthy. Sardines are also bony fish are rich sources of calcium and vitamin D. Use small amounts of healthy oils, so use sesame oil, olive oil for dressings, canola oil, red palm oil, or even extra virgin olive oil, and coconut oil for cooking. So eat eggs, poultry, consume dairy in small amounts, like I said, and eat sweets not so often. It says eat them about probably like once a week or on special occasions, and drink plenty of water. So this is just one other tip. I know for me, like I'm not always good at keeping track of making sure I'm eating enough greens. Just make a smoothie. I eat like a smoothie. I found a organic protein powder. It's a vegan protein powder. I mix it with blueberries, organic blueberries, strawberries, 2 scoops of the powder, and organic almond milk, and flax seeds are very good for you. So crush up the flax seeds and just put it all inside of a smoothie with greens. And although it might sound nasty thinking, oh, there's greens in this, it actually, you don't really taste them. The fruit kind of cancels out the bitterness of the greens. So that's another tip. So yeah, that's all really for this video. I was just motivated to do this because I think this is just a serious issue. Maybe another day I'm going to talk about things like in our hair products and our skin products. You know, that's a whole nother thing to talk about. You know, trying to avoid parabens, try to avoid certain fragrances that are detrimental to our health. So for this one, I just wanted to talk about the food issue, especially seeing people go crazy for these Popeye chicken sandwiches. I'm not saying I'm perfect with my health, because trust me, I'm not, and I definitely eat things that I shouldn't eat at sometimes. The key, I think, is to make sure that it's very rare, that you're more so giving yourself fresh food, not staying away from processed food, stay away from GMO. If you can't completely cut it out, just try your best to cut it out, because like I said, there's a lot of things you're eating. Anytime you eat out, you're eating GMO, unless you're at a restaurant that specifically markets non-GMO. So it's hard to completely cut these things out, but don't let it be high in your diet. So like that article was saying about the children with autism, they had very high levels of GMO because of eating a lot of corn tortillas. So now that you know that the corn tortillas are GMO, look for something that's non-GMO. You know, you can go to Whole Foods, they have non-GMO tortillas, Trader Joe's, go to places like that and look for that label, non-GMO. Read your ingredients. I've learned that a lot of things that I didn't know had these things in them have them. So read your ingredients, know what's inside of them, and just educate yourselves. We have to really do something, because to me, this is just another way to exterminate us, you know, and it's no coincidence to me that this all came down from the federal government, who really pushed fast food into the black neighborhoods. So now it's time for us to stop being victims and to take control of our own lives, and to show that we're not being victims of this federal policy, and that our children are not inheriting these things and not being exterminated from the poor decisions that were enforced inside of our subconscious to basically adhere to. So that's all I have for this video, guys. I will see you in the next video. Like I said, AfricanEsquireTV.com. That's where you'll find all of the articles. So you guys, I will see you in the next video.